Good evening. North American tribes, particularly in the east and in the north, going all the way through Canada, where it gets very cold in very long, harsh winters, where sometimes people are pushed to the brink of survival and, in very rare extreme cases, have to resort to cannibalism just to survive. As people fall and the food gets thin, human beings become a source of energy, become a source of food. And there are many taboos of this all across the world in many cultures, and it seems to be one of the facts that makes us human, that we count as civilization, is that we don't eat each other in the quite literal sense. So there is a depiction, you guys have probably heard of it, of the Wendigo. It is tall, emaciated, very bone-like structure. It has antlers like a deer, sometimes depicted as having a head like a human, sometimes with a complete deer head, blood, and it is considered insatiable. It is an insatiable cannibal in the sense that it eats humans. And no matter how much it eats, no matter how ravenous it is, it can't ever scratch that hunger. And its curse upon the land is that it will never ever get full. It will never be satisfied, no matter how many people it eats and how many people it kills and takes out. And if you look at the various tribes, it's interesting that they have some different takes. Some tribes believe that if you partake in cannibalism, you can become a Wendigo and you can succumb to madness and you can be pretty much possessed like a demon and become a Wendigo. Other tribes think of it as a independent being, that if you get bit by one or you encounter one, then you will become a cannibal. And it seems like it's really a demonic creature to me, something that feeds on the very darkest recesses of our mind, which is, like I said, don't eat each other. And for these tribes that lived in very cold climates, like I was saying, it's a very real threat. This winter, will we be able to hunt enough? Did we save enough? Were we able to harvest enough? Are we going to make it? And there's a scientific theory that goes along with this as well, modern day Western science, called the Wendigo psychosis, which is where a person becomes ravenous for human flesh and wants to eat people and sometimes kills people and eats them. And there's a very real scientific part of that, not so much the psychosis part of it, that there is a prion that does exist. A prion is a very small, smaller than amoeba. It's a very tiny little bacteria, more or less. And when it gets into the human, from eating raw flesh, they can be cooked out. But it typically inhabits in the brain and the spinal column of people. And if you eat enough people, you can get infected with this prion, and your brain will you'll slowly go insane. Your brain will break down as this prion slowly eats you and takes you over from the inside. It's kind of like mad cow disease for humans, and you get shaky, and that's kind of the whole thing. If you guys have seen in movies or in documentaries about cannibals, where they get really shaky and they have weird speech patterns and they get strange, it's because they've eaten enough human flesh and they got this prion in them, this really super tiny bug infection, and it's slowly taking them over. So knowing about this, that's a certain real fear about eating people, from a practical point of view, is that you could become this ravenous, insatiable, blind rage, shaking, mad person. And you got to think of the Wendigo as also kind of like a harbinger of death. It's kind of a belief. It's kind of like a demon. If you're alone in the woods, you could see this thing. It's kind of a cultural boogeyman, and it's very fascinating to me. There's been a lot of stuff about the Wendigo lately, a lot of things in popular culture. Just the pure idea about no matter how much you ate, the skinnier you got and the more ravenous, like the whole catch-22, this vicious cycle. And really keep people in at night, and it's quite scary. I believe personally, I do believe in demons. You can if you want to, and obviously I don't blame you if you don't. But ghosts, demons, things from the underworld, and I do believe this is a type of demon. And I do believe that this is something out there, maybe deep in the woods, an ancient Native American spirit. If you go further down south, tribes have their versions of skinwalkers and other types of tricksters and boogeymen, and stories to keep people in at night, real fears. Are they metaphor for something else? Or is there something else? Is there something else that people are seeing out there, that when they hear Wendigo stories, when they hear about cannibals, when they hear about cannibal giants, especially in the Northeast, when you have the tradition of like the Genosqua, which is a very large Bigfoot-like creature that was also known as the Stone Giants, and they were known as the Cannibal Giants, and they would roll around in sap and pitch, and then go roll around in stones, and this would be great protection against stone arrows. So these Bigfoot monstrous stone creatures could come in, and the natives would fire arrows at them and have very little effect. We've talked about this in videos. But if you go farther north into the real heavy cold climates, like the Algonquin people, and going all the way through Canada, when you see a lot of the tribes talk about the Wendigo, it seems like they could almost be talking about, I want to say real creature, because like I said, I do believe in demons. By the way, a side note for a second, it's also remarkable to me that this rake creature people are seeing, this emaciated skeleton-like creature people are seeing that has fantastically been reported, sometimes has a striking resemblance to the Wendigo. And skinwalkers, you look at skinwalkers, this rake creatures, Wendigo creatures, dogman, goatman, even Sasquatches, carnivorous varieties of Sasquatches, and it paints this whole picture of very strange creatures and where they're coming from, and it's not a modern thing. You look back, and this goes back a long way. So I think it's very interesting that some depictions very much look like this rake creature that people are seeing that was made popular by creepypastas. Yeah, but it's fascinating to me how some depictions of this thing look very animal-like, but with almost a like 20% human added to them and a very twisted human. And other of them look like a walking skeleton, but with antlers on them. And if you look all through histories, especially through Europe and stuff, the depiction of skulls and skeletons, especially walking around, the dead rising from the grave, almost kind of your classic zombie type thing, where you're going to die and you're going to get resurrected as this mindless, flesh-eating killing machine. And are you going to, are you possessed by a demon? Are you the manifestation of a demon? Is this just fears and psychology brought on by hunger, trying not to give into it? And then finally, like we've talked about on this channel, the Wendigo varieties of Bigfoots, these things are the polar bear varieties. Quite a few people have seen them where they talk about, hey, it looked like a Bigfoot, but it was huge, 9, 10, 11 feet tall. Huge at the shoulders, but it had big canines, sharp claws. It wasn't like a Patty Bigfoot. This thing was built for business. Like the difference, like if Patty was a grizzly bear, these things are like a polar bear. Primarily eat meat. If you check out Brian Duke Sullivan at World Bigfoot Radio, he had an encounter of one of these things as a kid, and it scared the crap out of him. It still haunts him to this day. And these Wendigo creatures, solitary lives, they live by themselves, they live in the extreme cold, and they are very happy 20, 30 below zero, and they eat meat because meat is such an efficient calorie source compared to vegetable matter. And when you get into very high, rugged, long winter places, there just isn't that much vegetable matter to eat. So it makes sense morphologically for one of these creatures to exist, to be primarily carnivorous. And they seem to be pretty rare, but people do talk about them. Like I said, I think they're pretty if you talk about a Wendigo type Bigfoot, which I think kind of, if you're a native and you saw these big 10, 12 foot tall hairy giants abducting people and eating people right in front of you, or you'd find the bones in the scattered the next day, you would think that they were a Wendigo got them too. So anyway, that's my quick breakdown for you guys on what I think is going on with the Wendigo phenomenon. I think it's scary as hell. I think it's cool depictions. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to subscribe, that would really help out the channel. Ring that bell notification. And we'll try to talk about other paranormal topics out there. And want you guys to stay safe in the woods. And thank you very much.